Hey, what's going on, everyone? A while back, I had a request from a viewer who wanted me to go over how to fish a kelp forest. So, disclaimer is this. Again, I've been doing this a couple of years, so not everything that I say is going to be spot on or even accurate. So, if you watch a video of mine and I say something inaccurate, don't be afraid to chime in. I'm not going to bite your head off. I mean, do it in a tactful kind of way, but do chime in, and that way everyone learns. Okay, so we're gonna start with Google Earth, and this is King Harbor, of course, where we launched from. And then I would say the kelp forest starts kind of like right around here, which is where the beach ends, and then it'll go all the way through here and beyond. So I would say the paddle from King Harbor to the beginning or the edge of the kelp forest is probably about 2.5–3 miles. And as I've mentioned in my other videos, going south or southwest is typically a good option because the winds will typically, in our area, blow out of the south or southwest. So let me begin with what you might see visually. Depending on the year, some years are better kelp years than others, depending on the location. Like SoCal, the kelp is not nearly as thick as Central Cal. And also depending on the tide. So for example, we're going to pretend this is the water surface here. If you're someplace in SoCal and you go during high tide, like an extreme high tide, you may not even see the tip of the kelp. I mean, there may be 10 feet in between the water surface and the kelp. Conversely, if you go to someplace like Central Cal or you go during extreme low tide, you may have kelp that grows right to the surface of the water and then will kind of curl over, depending on which way the current is going. And in that scenario, there's going to be kelp virtually everywhere you look. Typically on YouTube, what you will see is footage of a boat that's posted up somewhere along the fringes of the forest, and then they will throw and cast swim baits typically into these lanes here, like so. So essentially what they're doing is they're taking a horizontal approach to fishing the kelp beds. And with a boat, you can't really get into the thick of things because obviously you have to worry about water depth and then getting kelp wrapped around your prop and things of that nature. With a kayak, there are no such limitations. So y'all know I ride a Hobie, so what I will do is I will pull the Mirage drive up, pull up the rudder, and then paddle my way into these potholes, okay? Here, and these are all spots that a boater could not possibly access. So I think there are a couple of big advantages to this approach. Number one, the fish that live inside these potholes haven't seen nearly the same pressure as the fish living inside these lanes have seen. Number two might be more of a personal thing. When you are fishing horizontally, the chances of you getting hung up are greater than if you're fishing vertically. I'm not saying you're not going to get hung up if you fish vertically, but less so than horizontal. And few things annoy me more than getting hung up while fishing. Okay, it means that you have to take your vessel, your kayak, to the point where it's gotten hung up, and then you have to make circles, and then ultimately you may or may not get the lure back. It may mean that you may have to cut off and then retie. Just a huge hassle. So as I mentioned, I will go deep inside the kelp forest and fish these potholes. The quarry that's typically the most popular in kelp beds is probably, calicos? I'm sure there are yellowtail and white sea bass cruising around in there, but the chances of you wresting a yellowtail or white sea bass from a thick kelp forest, I don't think they're good. Some people might go after sheephead with shrimp. Anyways, it's a fun approach. The other insight that I want to share with you that's not immediately obvious, okay, if you go someplace where the kelp grows really tall and thick to the point where, again, it's meeting the surface and then curling over, what you see on the surface may not necessarily be indicative of what's happening below. Here you have some really tall kelp that's curling over, and then if this is your kayak, okay, right underneath you there's obviously kelp, okay, but if you drop down here like so vertically, okay, you're dropping down into a desert. And again, this is where electronics really pays dividends because you can't always trust what your eyes are telling you on the surface. So you see kelp on the surface, but you might be dropping down into not much at all. I mean, typically when you see kelp on the surface, you can assume or reasonably assume that there's interesting stuff down below, but not always. Okay, so now we're deep in kelp. Oh, this is kelp. 15.5 feet of water. So here I want to freeze the frame and talk about this scene more in detail. Obviously we're very tight to the coast and we are in about 16 feet of water. So when this footage was taken, it was taken during a full moon at high tide. So we have plenty of headspace between the tip of the kelp and the surface, probably close to 10 feet. So obviously when you see like big bumps and kelp, and these are probably little fish, it's way better than fishing in a desert, okay? So this is a pretty good scene from a fisherman's standpoint. But what I have found is that not every section of kelp is created equal. Some sections hold way more fish. I couldn't possibly tell you why, I only know it to be the truth. And because kelp is so fluid and transitory in nature, me dropping a waypoint for you guys isn't really going to help you because the day after, those conditions may have changed. So in this scene, we're in about 28 feet of water. The kelp isn't overwhelming. I mean, there's some kelp around, there are some fish marks around. And, you know, just because you see a ton of kelp, it doesn't mean that the fish are gonna like it better. Compare that to this scene. So this is about as good a mark as you're gonna find. The structure, you got fish, you got bait. I mean, this is a great mark. So the point is, don't always rely on your eyes. Let the sonar do the work and look and learn to recognize scenes that are maybe good versus can't miss, like this scene right here. So you've got some kelp, some structure, you've got tons of fish, you've got bait. This is probably a can't miss scenario. Having said that, if you are hunting sheephead, and I typically don't target sheephead, but if you are, you want to find, I think, the thickest kelp that you can find and fish blind, because I don't think with all the clutter and kelp around, you're going to see the traditional fish marks. I think the rig of choice for a sheephead is the tried and true double dropper loop rig, and by far and away the best bait I've been told is shrimp as opposed to squid. Again, I'm more of a visual hunter type of person. I like to hunt or look for things and then I want to see a payoff. So stuff like sheephead and halibut fishing really don't do it for me. Okay, so I think for the next minute or so, I want to give you short clips where I kind of narrate and give you insight as to what I'm thinking. So yeah, again, you know, lots of good places to drop. Not every one of these places is gonna hold a fish, but we're only in like 30 feet of water, so it doesn't take very long to just drop down and have a look. This right here would be another great place to drop down. These are all fish. So again, some marks are better than others, and you have to be able to distinguish between structure and fish. It's a little bit of structure here, lots of fish. Same thing with this. This is probably some kelp. It's too uniform to be fish. These right here, broken line, these might be fish. I mean, here are a couple of single fish here, but we're looking for, you know, streaks across the screen. Those are going to be aggressive fish that are probably going to bite. So this is where having a graph and really knowing how to read it comes in handy, because right now, right below us, there's nothing, very little. And then here, which is ground that we've gone over, there are clearly fish. So we need to circle back and find these fish. So we're in like 30 feet of water, and you can see things are getting bumpier. Now, some of these bumps are the swells talking, okay? So as the boat moves up and down, it represents as bumps. But some of these bigger, you know, structures, that's definite structure. In terms of gear, if you're the kind of person who likes being stationary for a while, you might want to try chumming, again, especially if the fishing is slow. I've been told that you should look for the seafood-based cat food. And before you chum, you might want to try and figure out which way the current is going and then chum the area, ahead of you in terms of the current movement. Okay, at this point, all that's left is the gratuitous fish catching footage.
Fish. Better fish. Oh. Oh, look at this. Oh, dude, I'm gonna let you go.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this video. Hey, as always, thank you for dropping by. Get out there, have fun, be safe, and we will see you soon. Bye for now.